Welcome back to Rise and Tell with Sheekha. I am Sheekha Singh, your host and author. I have got something special to share. My brand new book, Unburnable Ambition: How Overachievers Win Without Burning Out, is coming on Jan 5th, 2026. This book is for all of us who dream big but refuse to let burnout be the price. If you'd like early chapter, preview, and launch bonuses, head to shikhasingh.com/unburnable ambition and sign up today. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today we have with us Dr. Andy Neillie. Welcome to our show, Andy. How have you been?
Good. Great to talk with you again. Looking forward to a spirited conversation.
Same here. Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And I thank you for taking out time from your busy schedule for gracing us with your presence on our show today, Andy.
Well, you give me a lot more credit than I deserve. It's an honor to be with you. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it.
All right. So let's just dive right in, Andy. I know you've had a lot of experience as a leader yourself. You have your very successful business. Tell us, what's that one stark difference between a manager and a leader?
Boy, if you and I could figure that out and write that book, we could retire as millionaires, I think. But there is a difference. I appreciate you bringing that up because managers are typically focused on outcomes and things. Leaders, while focused on outcomes and things, are also focused on the people and the development of the people underneath them. So I guess if there's one thing that defines a leader who's working to become a high achieving leader and not just a manager, it is they recognize my primary responsibility is the growth of my people.
Right. Got it. Okay. I know, Andy, you've had a lot of experiences, and I'm very curious to know, and I'm pretty sure viewers and listeners are also curious to know. So, what was the moment you decided you didn't want to be a toxic leader? What was that experience?
Mm. Well, I had a few along the way, but early on in my career, really even before career, I became a follower of Jesus when I was a young child. I don't come from a churched home, but my faith was very important to me. And I'm reading in the Gospels about this other-oriented servant leader, and then I'm going to work for a boss who is exactly the opposite of that. He's got anger management issues. I was working my way through university, working in construction, and if he had a power tool in his hand when he lost it and you were within range, man, you better watch out. He had these, he wasn't a good person. He wasn't just not a good boss. He couldn't control his own temper. So I'm reading about this greatest servant leader of all time, and then I'm going to work for a man who's got anger management problems. And that began to awaken in me it shouldn't be this way. And along the way, I think most of us have probably had a toxic boss or two, and it just is wrong. It's just wrong.
It is. And I feel like as a leader, you should be even more conscious of your communication style, your temper, I feel like you need to have more empathy and you need to be so accommodating than you usually are when you're a leader, especially if you're working in a corporate setup and if you have people reporting to you. Andy, I want to know, most of our listeners are either new to leadership positions or some have been in that position for, let's say, 5 years, 4 or 5 years. So, what would be your biggest tip or your biggest suggestion to these young leaders who are still trying to navigate the waters of leadership, especially in a remote setup?
Yeah. Well, remote makes it particularly challenging, doesn't it? Because that, what is that old UCLA study? 58% of our communication is nonverbal. Another 38% is the tone of our words. Only 7% is actually the words we speak, I think. So obviously on Zoom, some of that is recaptured on different video platforms. But I think emerging leaders just need to recognize probably two things. The first job of a leader is to lead themselves well. So they need to have their own rhythm. I call it the leader's hour. For me, it's first thing in the morning. I've got some physical disciplines. I've got some spiritual disciplines. I take a look at the day in front of me and the week in front of me and prioritize and exhale and think about the people I need to interact with and how do I prepare myself. The leader's hour, the first job of a leader is to lead themselves well. And then I think the second thing is to recognize this type of leader you and I are talking about, the leader who wants to become a high achieving leader and not just be known as
Right.
a manager. They just have to recognize that they're at the bottom of the pyramid. They're not at the top of the pyramid. Their very best day may be when they get no credit at all, but the people underneath them perform well. They're
Correct.
at the bottom of the pyramid, making their people successful. So I think I would mention those two things. Start with yourself and make your people look good.
Wow, what a wonderful, brilliant thought there. I never saw or never heard it from that perspective because all the time people are thinking about how to grow, how to climb the corporate ladder,
Yeah.
and how instead of being at the bottom, everybody wants to be at the top. But then when you mentioned that point, you realize that yes, being a leader is definitely a thankless job. And the fact that you're not getting credit or you're not getting that attention, but people who are working for you are happy, content, says a lot about your style of
Yeah.
leadership.
Well,
Great.
and they end up overperforming. They have fewer PTO days. Their job satisfaction is higher.
Yes.
The cost of replacing an employee, we've both heard, can be anywhere from 60 to $200,000 depending upon the role they're in or more. Leader satisfaction is one of the prime indicators of employee satisfaction. Stephen Covey said it more than a generation ago. People join jobs for their work, they leave organizations because of their boss. And so if you want to address employee retention, if you want your people to perform better for you, become the kind of leader that you and I are talking about.
Exactly. I love it. And I want to know, Andy, I have been in that position. I want your take on what are some things that employees can do and what are some things that leaders can do when there's a conflict. Because I have been in that exact same position.
Yeah.
I was very new to the workforce and I've had great leaders, and then suddenly I had this one manager, I want to call him,
Yeah.
never great. And I was so shocked. I'm like, what's going on? Because I know I my work's 100%. I've been a good employee. Everything's great. But just that mental exhaustion from having a bad leader takes a toll on you. And that's when you decide to switch jobs,
Right.
find new opportunities.
Updating
So,
your resume on LinkedIn. Yeah.
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 So, A, what can an employee do? And B, what should a leader do? And what would be some of the signs that they need to keep an eye on?
Boy, you're asking good questions. A couple of things come to mind for that team member, that employee. I mean, part of your responsibility is still to work hard for how you're being compensated. And
Right.
so, despite the noise around you, show up and work with excellence, right? Because that's what's going to continue to set you apart when other people are, bad mouthing the boss and grumbling and doing shoddy work and not wanting that person to succeed. As the team member, my job is to make that person as successful as possible. But as you and I alluded to, in the 2020s, where all of us, the job market is rich with opportunities, we also all need to be in charge of our own careers. And if I'm
Correct.
working for a horrible boss and things don't look like they're going to change, and I've reached out to HR or I've talked to the whatever protocol they have in place for me to elevate awareness, and nothing is happening, I think that's an indication that, as you and I said, that you need to update your resume on LinkedIn and just remember that the marketplace is employee favorable right now. There's typically opportunities if you are diligent, looking for that. On the leadership side, it really comes back to what you and I talked about a couple of minutes ago, where the first job of as a leader is to lead themselves well, and that personal development, not only that leader's hour early in the morning, but are you reading books on
Yeah.
becoming a high achieving leader? Are you taking a look at some contemporary podcasts that are sharing good insights with you, how to manage in a an environment where workforce opportunities are all around you, and people are always having their eyes open? I think part of the job of the leader is to recognize I don't just have a position. Every day I need to earn that position. And what does
Correct.
that require?
Correct. Absolutely correct. I 100% agree. That was on point.
Yeah.
Books, so important.
Yeah.
Many times people think they have the personality of a leader. Many times they think, oh, they've been with this team for X amount of time. They already know certain people. But it's so different. And it's so much more than just hanging out with someone for 1 year or 2 years.
Yeah.
And books on leadership are so important because I feel they give you a different perspective and certain pointers that you had no clue about. Emotions, for example.
Yeah.
Let's talk about those, Andy.
Yeah.
I know when it comes to the job, it's yes or no. Is it working? Is it not working? That was the biggest shock that I had when I moved up to a leadership position. I'm like, wow, being an individual contributor was so much more easy,
Oh,
especially when it comes to the technical stuff. Is it
yeah.
working? Is it not working?
Yeah.
That's it. If it's not working, I'm going to fix
Binary,
it.
black and white, and that's it. Yeah.
Exactly. But bam, now you're in a leadership position and there are emotions, there's expectations, there's communication, there are strategies. So, what would you tell to someone who is brand new, who isn't used to things being black or white, but now have to face emotions from people of different cultures? Because these days, most of the employers have a very diverse
Right.
culture.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you've already touched on some of that, and that is, first of all, just recognize that the whole irony of it, Sheikha, is the things you talked about, emotions and strategy and conflict and things. In the human HR world, they call these the soft skills. And it just makes me smile because these are like the hardest skills of
Exactly.
all. Truth of the matter is, I can learn to code. Truth of the matter is, I can learn to create formulas in a spreadsheet.
Yes.
Being able to read the room and understand who the players are, that's not a soft skill at all. So part of it is you
Correct.
really do need to become a student of culture, a student of gender, a student of human dynamics, and just recognize I may not be seeing everything I need to see. I
Mm,
remember when I first started traveling internationally, I spent quite a bit of time in the early 2000s on the road. I've got 5 million frequent flyer miles from working with clients globally and just recognizing I'm working with a team in Japan and they're not giving me anything. I can't get a single team member to really come forward. And I had
wow.
read in my books on cultural sensitivity before I flew to Japan that they're very subservient, they're very quiet, but actually being in that experiencing and realizing this is hard on me. I
Yeah.
want more feedback and recognizing, a good leader has got to meet the team member where they're at. And then I flew from Japan on this multi-leg trip to Australia where it's just like, hey, we start drinking beer at 10 o'clock in the morning and we're best friends with everybody. Hey, mate. And all of a sudden you realize the challenge is different.
Yes.
Japanese culture, they're too respect worthy. I want them to challenge my leadership some. And the Australian, it's like I feel like I'm fighting for every ounce of respect I can get. Whose job is it to be able to move in those dynamics? It's the leader's job to understand cultural, gender, geographic sensitivities. And then, Shika, you kind of got me on a soapbox here. It's not just Japan and Australia and Brazil and Canada and the U.S. It's the dynamics in that office. Who's playing what instruments in that office,
Yeah.
and the wise leader works really hard at understanding people where they're at. Are you married? What's your partner's name? Do you have
Yeah.
kids? Do you have dogs? Are you happy where you're at in life? Are you trying to move on? And for me, that means I just need to be a better active listener than I am at times,
Correct.
really seeking to understand, not just to get my way as a leader.
That is so true. I agree. Andy, I agree. Oh, wow. Especially the things that you come to know after having those one on one conversations with your team member and when they share certain personal details, you understand why a person works the way that he or she works. You understand their style, you understand their communication skills, like their whole personality kind of fits when you ask them what's going on at home.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that the industry doesn't prepare us for. When you're working in a very close knit situation, you're going out for happy hours, you're going out for team lunches. It's easy because you're in person. But when it comes to a remote setup, how do you deal with people who've had a personal loss? How would you communicate to someone? How would you show them that you're by their side and that you're going to support them? How, what are some of your tips, Andy?
You're asking such good questions. There's that ancient African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go with the team. And I think
Yeah,
part of what we're talking about is, how do I make sure that I'm spending enough time with my team, that we're there for the long haul, that we're there,
yeah,
and because we're all working so much remote, we have to be more purposeful about that. One of the teams I worked with recently, they grabbed hold of a book and they started a book club where they would have Zoom sessions on a book club. And not everybody fully participated. And you could tell some of the people didn't read the book, but they read Patrick Lencioni's book, The Ideal Team Player, which I know you and I are both fans of. It's a great book.
yes.
There's an assessment tied to it. Sheikha, I actually think the title of it's a great book, and I think the title is wrong, because I don't think the title should be The Ideal Team Player. I think the title of Patrick Lencioni's book, it should be The Ideal Team Leader, because as that leader had their team go through that book kind of chapter and chapter and talk about humble and hungry and smart, the three defining characteristics that come out in that book, it led to his team members telling stories about people they've worked with that were important to them and how they demonstrated these different character traits. And so some of those, lost hallway conversations took place, but it required the leader to say, all right, if I want to go fast, go alone. If I want to go far, go together. I need to
Yeah.
slow down and invest longer term with my family. We're going to do a book club. So that's probably one of the ways. And then, doing the whatever you can to periodically get a face to face rather than a phone call or email, and
Yeah.
seeing meetings as important. Meetings need to be purposeful, but meetings are important in a remote world.
I agree. I agree. I feel like, that earlier data that you just said, 7% is just actual talk. The rest of it is your body language, your facial expressions.
Nonverbal.
Yeah, nonverbal, the way of communicating nonverbally. I think that plays a major role in a remote setup, which is why our company included, I know most of them have a video on policy. Sometimes people think it's, too much, but I love it. I love it because I get to see where the tone is for the
Yeah,
day,
yeah,
for
exactly.
so many different calls, for so many different meetings, especially we are in an agile setup. So we have sprint plannings and story groomings and retrospectives
Yeah, yeah.
and daily stand up. If I see, some people not having a great day, I don't pin them, I don't put them on the spot. I'm not going to badger them for not giving me a great answer. But as long as they're telling me, okay, what they're working on, I think I'm fine with it. I'm going to
Yeah,
leave you alone for that day. And I
yeah,
feel those verbal cues, those non-verbal cues, everything plays a great major impact, not just on you as a person and a leader, but on the overall team too. And I feel like people pick up certain things,
I
even if
agree.
it's remote, certain
Yeah,
behaviors. And someone like I have this one leader, and she's very observant. So whenever we are on a call, and if there's this guy who keeps talking and cracking jokes every day, but if someday he's super quiet, she will notice.
she zeroes in on. Good for her. Good for her.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And she'll say, "Hey Rich, what's going on? You are pretty quiet today. Is everything all right?" And that to me speaks volumes
that's that
because
active
one,
listening.
exactly, she's actively listening, she's taking note of who's their behaviors, how they are, and it impacts the entire team because then if that person chooses to open up or share their issues or problems, or just if they're having a bad day,
Yeah.
people then jump in to try to make that
Yeah.
person feel
Yeah.
better.
Well, and that's where I think, you touched on it. We all live in such virtual worlds so often. I think it should be 101 by now. We're 5 years into this new world in the mid 2020s. Leaders, you need to be on camera all the time. You're not
Yes.
allowed to hold a meeting and have your camera off. And you need to take a look at what Sheekha did or look what I did. You need to have a warm background. You need to have a light in front of you. You need to have a camera up. We're this is table stakes for leaders and managers. You set the tone for that. And the nice thing, Sheik, is that we lose so much in a virtual world, but we also gain some things because you see the cat jump up on the table next
Yeah.
to that team member, or the dog walk in behind, or
Yeah.
you and I both have very nice background. I was pretty purposeful. If you look behind me, I've got a water ski. I can't tell you how many conversations that has prompted with clients and people. Oh, tell me about that. And then my responsibility is to learn about their experience growing up on a lake with their grandparents who took them fishing or skiing. And all of a sudden, we had an opportunity to connect leader to team member at a level that we might not have in the office, because nobody would know that he grew up fishing with his grandpa, or
Yeah.
she grew up behind a boat with her three siblings on a inner tube, and all of a sudden we have that in common. So I do think there are some opportunities. It requires the leader to recognize, I've got to set the expectation. I need to have my camera on. I need to have my lights working. I need to have those things. And then when I ask that team member, they're more likely to come in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. Agreed. Let's pivot, Andy. Now I'm interested to know more about you as a leader and more about you as a person. So you had a diverse career. You've started off as a contractor and you were a leader, worked for a lot of companies, dealt with $1 million contracts, and now you're having your own business. Tell me, what fueled you?
There is a kind of a red thread through all of it that I don't think I recognized during the times that I was involved. But as I entered the third of my career now, I'm closer to retirement age than I am to starting my career. I look back, and the whole thing we've been talking about for 30 minutes now, people in positions of influence need to use their influence well. and
Right.
and if you and I believe that people have callings on their lives, that's my calling, to tell people who are in positions of influence, their responsibility is to use that influence well. And so, when I was working with a frontline sales team managing 11 people, when I've grown this $5 million business around me, when I've earned 5 million frequent flyer miles from traveling around the globe working with Fortune 500 companies on leadership development. It looks like a very varied, different pockets of careers, but none of us come to the same company and stay for 35 years anymore. That's just not, you think about your agile sprints. People have agile careers in some respects. For me, the consistent reoccurring theme, whether I was teaching at the graduate school level or building a small team myself, it was this passion around people that are in positions of influence need to use their influence well. So if you were to summarize my career in a nutshell, it would be that sentence, no matter where I landed. I'm not the best financial person. I'm not the best policies and procedure person. I'm not even really the best active listener that you and I've been talking about. But what makes me really frustrated was when I see bad bosses being bad bosses.
Yes, I agree. Wow, that was incredible. And I feel that's impressive, Andy. I know you're selling it short, but I feel that you've experienced so many things, which is why now you have a successful business that's running on the whole point and the whole concept of leadership. And you conduct so many workshops and you meet different people from different backgrounds and domains, which I feel is, again, you're growing but in a
Yeah.
different way now, and like you said, you're in a different phase of your career.
Right.
So I want to know, what was one of the most challenging situations that you've ever had to face as a leader?
So I moved into a different industry about 15 years ago, and I now own a series of retail businesses, brick and mortar storefront retail businesses. And we hire a lot of part-time workers, and we
Yes.
have a lot of frontline managers that have bounced from job to job to job to job to job. And prior to this, I'd been in always more of corporate environments and corporate settings where people had their MBAs and people were used to traveling nationally and internationally, and recognizing the challenges of local oriented part-time workers and frontline managers, and making sure that I try to give them what they need to be successful. I still don't think I have figured it out. I'm not a fast twitch muscle fiber kind of person. And working in a brick and mortar business requires fast twitch muscle fiber. And so sometimes I think I've set them up for success. The main thing I've done is try to get out of their way so they can do the job much better than I can.
Yeah. And I feel you've touched on a very important point, Andy. Even though the domains and the industries are completely different, that one line that you just said, I get out of the way so that they can do their job. I feel that's so important because somewhere along the line, certain leaders become micromanagers
Yeah.
even though they didn't want to. Maybe they've had situations, maybe they've had past experiences, good and bad, both. And that's one of the major things that hinders the growth of a team and the leader too. Because then you've got this label now with you that, oh, you know what? She's a micromanager.
Yeah.
Or he's a
Well, and I think
micromanager.
there's several challenges with that. First of all, you just totally demotivate people, right? When you
Yeah,
micromanage them. Furthermore, you're blocking their growth. I think part of what a manager who's committed to becoming a high achieving leader, this very conversation we'll focus on for our entire time together, has to recognize I have to give people permission to do things differently than I would have, which means at times they're going to make mistakes.
correct.
I was promoted into my position because I was a top performer, probably. I know how to solve that, but I'm going to solve it the way I'm going to solve it. I've got to give Andy permission,
Yeah.
which means at times he's going to be late. He's going to overrun budgets. He's going to write ugly code. He's going to slow the team down. But if I keep grabbing it out of his hands, he never has the opportunity to grow. And then the one other thing, and I will tell you, this is again part of my toxic boss background. The other problem with micromanagers is they take credit for too much. And I worked for a boss a number of years ago now where I worked around some really good people, and he never made any of us look good in front of his team, in front of the
Mm,
senior leaders, in front of clients. He was always taking credit in his very language. It was I language rather than we language.
mm.
Leaders, it is all about the we and not about the I. Truth of the matter is, at times the leader is still doing most of the heavy lifting, but they share that credit so that the team continues to develop. Don't micromanage, don't take credit for work others have done.
Wow, wonderful. Great, great thoughts right there, Andy, and great suggestions. I feel these are some of the things that often get missed by a lot of people because they're in the rut, they're in that zone, they're just doing things, they want to be better. And then when they take a step back
Yeah,
or when they've had a difficult conversation, I think that's when they realize, oh, I did not even realize I was doing that
yeah,
until it was too late.
yeah.
Great pointers. I want to thank you, Andy, for all these amazing suggestions that you gave to us today, all these amazing tips for sharing your experiences. But before we end the show, Andy, are there any thoughts that you would like to share with us? Any last suggestions or advice for emerging leaders?
Well, first of all, I just need to tell your listeners, Sheikha is just so gracious and flexible. We were supposed to do this podcast several weeks ago. I was in a hotel. The internet was crummy. We kept stopping and starting. She graciously, we agreed to do it again. So thank you for rescheduling. It's just
Of
been a privilege
course.
to visit with you. Hopefully this is the first of subsequent conversations.
Yes.
I think it goes back to what you talk about. you and I talked about at the very beginning of our time together, and that is the job of a leader is to lead themselves first.
Yeah.
Become the person that other people would want to follow. Are you the best boss they've ever worked for? Are you one of the best people they know? That's the type of work a leader who's committed to becoming a high achieving leader needs to be doing.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you for
Well,
your
thank
time.
you. Thanks for your
Thank
diligence.
Oh, of course. Of course. It's my pleasure and I'm so honored that I get to talk to you and ask you all these wonderful questions. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much again. You have a great rest of your day, Andy.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for tuning in for today's episode of Rise and Tell with Shikha. My upcoming book, Unburnable Ambition, is all about how to chase your biggest goals without losing yourself to burnout. You can now sign up at shikhasingh.com/unburnable ambition for early access and launch updates. Until next time, keep growing, keep glowing, and be yourself, and keep your ambition unburnable. Thank you.